the Within Orb podcast. Come get Within Orb. Hello, my name is Jenn Zahrt, and welcome to Within Orb, a production of the Celestial Arts Education Library, a podcast bringing people together around the love of astrology, books. Join me as I interview people about the astrology books that changed their life and practice. You can support the podcast at withinorb.com. Welcome.
Welcome. Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. Today I am here with James Dotson. James, how would you describe yourself?
Wow, my God, that's kind of complicated. So I am an astrologer, student of astrology, eternal student, I guess.
And also in a larger context, I got to know you through the world of perfume and esoteric perfume.
Yes. So my background in that is that since I was very young, I have a very strong interest in plants, and I became very interested in fragrant plants and the whole culture of perfume. And then when I was in medical school, I was asked to do an honors thesis, and I chose to do it on olfaction, the sense of smell. I was mostly really interested in how smell is associated with trance states, but I did this whole review of all kinds of historical stuff. And then since then, I've been involved as far as teaching in Los Angeles at a place called the Institute for Art and Olfaction, which is a nonprofit. The goal of it is to open up knowledge of fragrance and perfumery to everyone. And I do some classes there. And that's, one of my big interests.
Awesome. One of the first German novels I ever read was called Das Parfum from Patrick Suskind. Have you read that novel?
In translation, yes.
Yes. Yeah, it was astonishing to me to read a book about smell because it categorically can only smell like a book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What did you think of that story?
It's quite brilliant. It is challenging. People struggle with descriptors for fragrances. It's this semantic muscle that you have to exercise where you learn how to make sensory connections. So, in fact, I'm interested in sensory qualities of the planets. Like, what does a planet feel like? Is it raspy? Is it smooth? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? And that's how you kind of learn to come up with words that correspond to fragrances.
Mm-hmm. There's a nebula that smells like raspberries.
Ooh.
Yeah, the chemical component of the nebula itself has the olfactory signature of the same smell of a raspberry. I forget which nebula it is. I think it's in Sagittarius. Of course, the Sagittarius nebula would smell like a raspberry.
I'm going to have to find.
Yeah, so let's go back to the beginning. So you're not yet into astrology. How did astrology knock on your door? And which book was your first astrology book? Sort of how did you meet astrology, and what book got you in the mix?
I was born and raised in San Diego, California. My parents had not the slightest interest in anything obscure or astrological or anything like that. But I was a crazy little book freak and was obsessed with reading. In fact, I was so obsessed with books that my mother was, I don't say she was alarmed, but she was like, I just kept saying I want to learn how to read even before I was in kindergarten. And so she got this tutor and I learned how to read with this 19th century textbook called McGuffey's Reader. And I actually learned how to read really early. And then I was instantly in the library getting books. And I always liked books on mythology and folklore and anything supernatural. And my local branch library, which is like about 5 minutes away, happened to have a lot of astrology books. What I didn't know till later is because San Diego was the home of the Rosicrucian Fellowship, which produced an ephemeris and astrology books. They had this sort of policy where they donated their astrology books, to local libraries. And so there just were lots and lots of copies of their books, but also a lot of others. Yeah.
Wow. That's a really cool resource.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard that it's hard to keep astrology books in public libraries because they get stolen.
Well, this is the 70s. Maybe that wasn't as big a deal. I don't really know. So,
yeah. So which was your first encounter with an astrology book that you remember? Because it sounds like you were swimming in a lot of them.
I was swimming in a lot of them. There are several that come to mind. And I do remember this 24-volume encyclopedia of the supernatural called Man, Myth, and Magic. It was an illustrated encyclopedia, which interestingly had extremely well-written articles. And I know they had astrology stuff. I just looked it up again. It came out in around 1970. And Ellic Howe wrote the astrology article. He wrote on.
No way.
Yes, he was a scholar, history. He did, a lot of stuff with World War II and German.
Yeah, Ellic Howe is a historian of astrology who wrote to date, the best history of German astrology in English. I was hoping to do a better job, but he did a great job.
So this 24-volume book was in the library. I was obsessed with it. It had great pictures and unusually well-written articles, and they were by scholars, which is, you would think that it was just trash, but it wasn't. So I had that, and I had several other things, but I know the book that I purchased that I read like a bazillion times. Which is Llewellyn, George, A to Z, horoscope maker and delineator.
That is a classic textbook of astrology.
Yes. So I decided I needed to have one at home after checking things out from the library. And I had seen that one and I had read through it, but I saved my Christmas birthday cash money because it was kind of pricey. I think I was like 12 or 13. And I purchased it and I took it home. And when something is so precious because you spend a lot of money on it, I read that thing all the way through several times. I was very good at math. And so I was there and I got my little ephemeris and table of houses and learned how to construct a chart and go through basic delineations. That book is very good for that. As well as having weird tables in the back, like it would have a list of locations and keywords for planets and stuff, which I thought was really fun.
So you learned spherical trigonometry through astrology?
Well, yes, I was in advanced math classes when I was little. It was like nothing to me because I was really good at math. So
you were already in it. And so it's like, oh, you don't have a computer to do charts. At that point, there were no computers that could do it, right?
Correct. I believe San Diego was one of the first places that had computer printouts for charts. I can't remember the guy's name, but I got one from a friend of mine. It's like this incredibly old printout. It must have been late 70s or early 80s.
Like a dot matrix printer?
Yes.
There's something that I think was called the Digicomp 7900 or maybe something. I don't know.
Sure.
Before my time, that's for sure. But yeah, the tables of houses and doing logarithms and trying to actually erect a chart by hand is very not commonly taught these days. I think we're going back to that. I've sort of seen whispers around the community that people are learning how to do charts by hand again.
Well, learning stuff like daily motion and stuff like that is very helpful. Otherwise, you just don't grasp things.
Yeah. It gives you a sense of like what you're actually looking at, really,
And when a planet is slow, fast, or whatever. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so you started with Llewellyn's A to Z.
Right.
Now, let's imagine for a moment that you're stuck somewhere like in a cave. I said desert island sometimes, but let's just pretend today we're in a cave. Or a remote place, right? Oh, actually, no, maybe you could be at the seed bank in the Arctic, somewhere interesting. And you're packing your bag and you're bringing some astrology books with you. Which books are you taking?
Okay, so this would change from month to month because what I'm into. I have to be honest, for me, some astrology books are symbolic objects which just have a great importance in my life. And so maybe not the content, but the actual book. So I would have to say, because I'm very interested in astrological magic, there would have to be the Picatrix. And I remember after many years of looking, I found a copy of the Latin version of it by Pingree from the Warburg that came out, I think, in the 80s, but I didn't find it till the 90s. There was a book dealer who found a couple copies of it because it's pretty obscure. And then it has microfiche in the back with like an Arabic version of it. And my Latin is terrible. I had some Latin, it's okay, but I was just so excited when I got it because it was something I had looked at for a long time. Yeah.
So is it printed in Latin or is it like a facing page transcription situation?
Oh, it's not translated into English. I mean, there's a prefatory notes and some sort of explanatory stuff, but then the whole thing is in Latin.
Wow.
And there's a little sleeve in the back that has microfiche. I don't even know anyone who has a microfiche reader, but someday I'll find one.
That's amazing. That's amazing. The last time I was around one was at the UC Berkeley Library. So maybe if you're over there.
But anyway, so that I would have that because that's symbolically important to me. I might have, I know. So I just recently decided that I would maybe have this pithy little 100-page book.
Oh, Ebertein's Transits. What day is favorable for me?
I just love this book. It's really small, but it's very pithy and it has just interesting kind of like bullet points for like planetary combinations and stuff. So,
okay, that's lightweight. You can pack that in easily. Let's go back to the Picatrix, though, just before we move on too far. Why would you take the Latin version and not a translation?
Because that was my first Picatrix that I could ever get. And so it's kind of important to me.
Okay.
It's a symbolic object. So.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to ask you, like, which translation do you prefer? But that gets in a whole, political.
I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
Exactly.
I have every single translation, including, there was a German version that came again from the Warburg. I think it came out in the 30s and maybe was reprinted in the 60s, but there was someone who did a partial translation into English from the German, and I have that too. It's kind of obscure.
Wow.
Yes, I'm waiting for the Arabic translation by Liana Saif, who was at Warburg, because I don't necessarily think it's better, but she's a master of all the traditions. I think it would be interesting just to see her point of view. Yeah.
Likewise. Yeah. She's a great scholar.
Do you want to spend your professional life telling people when to have sex? My name is Nicholas DeVore, and I'm the author of Fertility Astrology. Join me online this fall for the Fertility Astrology Intensive. This course is a first of its kind, consolidating all the astrological techniques you will need to be a world-class astrology and fertility consultant. I'm here to enhance your astrology. We are astrologers who want to make the most of the situation for yourself and your client. And we're going to share with you the things that have worked in my practice in the last 20 years. At the end of 14 weeks, you're going to be really confident when somebody asks you, do you think there's a chance I'm going to get pregnant this year? You'll have something real to tell them. But especially, come, let's talk about sex, baby.
To learn more and register for the September 9th start date, please visit our website at CAELi.institute. That's www.caeli.institute.
Astrology in the 21st century is more exciting than it's been in centuries, with revival of ancient, classical, Renaissance, medieval, and 20th century techniques, all bringing 21st century astrology into the most powerful system ever seen. But where do you begin to learn how to practice such a powerful system? I'm Rod Suskin, a professional astrologer with over 30 years experience. Come learn with me at the Rod Suskin School of Astrology, an all-online 3-year diploma, intense, exciting, and stimulating. Learn how to marry the best of the ancient techniques with the most powerful modern techniques to give clients an accurate, insightful reading. Visit rodsuskin.com for more information.
Okay, so that's 2 books. We've got the Latin Picatrix, and then we have Reinhold Ebertein's miniature book on transits. What would be another one you'd take along with you?
I couldn't decide on my third one. I had too many different ones.
You can press a bunch,
I found a book that I did have when I was a teenager, and I was just thinking how much I liked it. And so I will, wait, I have to open it up so you can read it. It's Encyclopedia of Astrology by Nicholas DeVore.
Yes. That book also has 1 million editions.
This is from the 60s. So I had this, and I was a person who liked to read encyclopedias. So I read it, but it had stuff no one else had. Like it had stuff on the degrees of the zodiac, but it focused more on fixed stars. And I was obsessed with the mansions of the moon, of which there was like no information. And so I read it, and it just had a lot of other technical stuff about essential dignities and stuff that you couldn't find elsewhere. So,
yeah, there's also the Arcana Dictionary of Astrology, which seems to take that into another direction, but similar kind of book, a reference work. What about if you could smuggle a couple more? Because it sounds like you've got a lot of these books almost as a talismanic object to be with you, working through osmosis.
So I find things, so as a kid, I also had this paperback reprint of a book by Safarial, the Prince of Astrologers. He was a theosophist, an early astrologer. He wrote a ton of books, and he wrote one in the 1920s called...
Yes, The Book of Charms and Talismans by Safarial.
Look how psychedelic this is, though.
Yeah, the cover is very bright, and it has a cat, the Eye of Horus, a 4-leaf clover, what's the beetle? The scarab?
Arab, yeah. Mhm.
And then a horseshoe and a rainbow.
So he's an astrologer. So, of course, there's astrological talismans. It had planetary talismans, which were ultimately from Agrippa as republished in the book The Magus, I think. And I was like so obsessed with those. I'm like, oh my God, it's a planet of it's a sun talisman or whatever with all the little magic squares and stuff like that. So this totally captured my attention as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked it. It was years before I really found out more about it. But yeah.
Yeah. And you wouldn't think looking at a book like that it had astrology in it.
He does put a lot of astrological talismans in it because he was an astrologer. He was a rather fascinating person. And do you know much about him?
Well, why don't you tell everybody listening?
Well, okay. So this is another backtrack about why I knew stuff. I was lucky to have a lot of mentors when I was growing up. And I grew up in San Diego where there were a lot of old theosophists because there had been a utopian community that was founded around 1900 called Loma Land. It was a theosophical community. And there were still some members left in the 70s who would come there as children. And one of my elementary school teachers was, I think, the child of theosophists. But long story short, I had met theosophists who would loan me books. And so I knew quite a bit about it. Mm-hmm. But Safariel was in this inner circle. Madame Blavatsky started this Theosophical Society in 1875. And she had an inner circle of people that she taught personally called Esoteric Session. And she taught a lot of practical occult stuff there. And he was in her super inner circle of 12 people. And he actually lived in her house. And he was there with her when she died. And she, apparently was quite fond of him. So he was an early theosophist, but he also seemed to go in a lot of magical directions. He wrote books on like crystal gazing and palmistry and card reading and stuff like that.
Wow, that's intense. To be there when she died and such a titanic figure, because it was their publishing efforts that actually did change the practice of astrology in the 20th century.
Yeah, we won't get into that. A lot of people feel like they trashed astrology because it became character analysis, but I kind of think they preserved it. And sadly, a lot of powerful techniques went underground for a long time, but nonetheless, it kind of is what it is. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, just the presence of it at all was maintained by their activities. And I think that's important to acknowledge.
Right.
For sure.
So, and then I had other mentors who were astrologers that I met as a teenager too. So
if we were to sort of look at the way that you're practicing now, you mentioned earlier about your interest in plants. Do you look at different astrological interpretations of plants, planets, things like that?
So yes, so I am interested in that. And of course, I think most people use these very Eurocentric texts, which of course is what we have by Nicholas Culpeper and so on and so forth. And those are valuable because those plants that were important were brought by settlers to North and South America and are used a lot, in different medical systems. But I think it's important for people to kind of learn the basics. How do you incorporate a new plant? Like if you're living in the desert and you come across something like, how would you decide is this ruled by such and such a planet and so on? How does its medical use perhaps give you clues about, how it may function astrologically and stuff like that? So,
So what are some of your source texts that are not in the Eurocentric Culpeper lineage? Do you have any books that take us down a wider lens?
To be honest, I've done some of this on my own, just based on my personal experience of either growing plants and or wildcrafting plants, because I do think it's important to do that. Like I used to grow roses. So roses are ruled by Venus. Like everyone's like, oh, they're ruled by Venus. And yes, they were used historically in the worship of Aphrodite. They had rose crowns for the goddesses and all that. But if you grow roses, I mean, several things. A, they have a lot of thorns, and there certainly is a very martial aspect to the plant. And the flowers can have a lot of different fragrances. Some of them go in a much more spicy kind of direction. Some are more lemony. Some are more fruity, and some are very musky. And so, there's lots of different subdirections in them. A lot of them seem much more lunar, like some of the white roses. Some of them seem much more Jupiterian. And you can just go on and on. So I don't really think of one planet ruling a plant, but there are, multiple rulerships depending on how you approach it. So I would say, I've read a lot of Daniel Schulke's stuff, which I think is interesting for Three Hands Press. He just has this new book out called Green Mysteries. And I don't necessarily concur on all his stuff, but he actually does, he studied botany in UC Santa Cruz and he knows a lot about plants. So I take what he says with a lot of interest. So.
Yeah. And so I'm hearing you say that knowing the cosmological makeup of the planet allows you to meet it through your own practice versus reading a book. Like a book, it might not be the best way to get this information.
It's a good way to start, though. I think people flounder without some kind of framework to start with, but then you can't take the framework too seriously because I consider it to be a convenient fiction that holds things together, but you have to poke at it a little. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. So if you were going to get a beginner into astrology, where would you position them? Like what text would you bring up for them to get into astrology?
Well, I think I mentioned this before we started recording. I haven't read a lot of introductory stuff lately, but I happened to pick up Chani's book recently because I thought she was interesting. And I know that she has a background in studying Hellenistic astrology, but she's made it also popular. So I just was curious about her book, but I found it really interesting. It bridges pop psychology with some more actual, really solid traditional stuff in a way that's reasonably approachable. And I think if I didn't know anything about astrology, I would find it a welcoming yet rigorous. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's Chani Nicholas born for this?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No worries. Just trying to shore that up. Yeah. One of her teachers was Demetra George. And Demetra is often brought up as one of the texts that people get sent to or authors that people read when they're getting into it. So yeah, but Chani's had quite a massive impact in the last 10 years on a new generation of astrologers. So
right. I mean, she's embraced social media. She definitely has the charisma kind of on screen and she's able to communicate really well. And that's important. So
yeah, very cool. Very cool. Well, what are you personally working on and where can people find you?
Well, I'm focusing a lot more on medical astrology more recently, and I'm sure we'll have a little talk soon about me, doing a Joseph Blagrave book group. Mm-hmm. I do a lot of stuff on perfume. I do have an upcoming class this summer for Salem Symposium, which is both astrological and perfume oriented, called Venus, Queen of Perfumes, and it focuses on the history of perfume making in the island of Cyprus, which is associated with Aphrodite, and sort of taking it through history. It also brings in some stuff like the use of magical gems, which kind of kept the traditions of, what Aphrodite does magically, percolating through the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and kind of brings it up and connects it also with like how perfume was used as a kind of Venusian influencer. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And do you have a website that people can go to, or?
Yes, my website is just changed carriers, so it's a little glitchy, but I'm working on it. But it is called uncannysynths.com.
Okay. And we'll put that in the show notes for everybody listening in case you want to pause and go over there. Okay. Well, thank you for joining me today. And yes, you will be coming back to the Celestial Arts Education Library for a book club where we will be reading Joseph Blagrave and getting into more plants, planets, medical, all the sort of medieval approaches to that entire rubric of astrology applied in the human body and more. So thank you for being the host for that. And more details will be available on the CAELi website as well. And yeah, thank you for your time today, James.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Within Orb. To learn more about the Celestial Arts Education Library, or to become a member, visit our website at caeli.institute. That's www.caeli.institute. If you enjoyed this episode, please help spread the word. Follow or subscribe to Within Orb in your podcatcher of choice, rate it 5 stars, or write us a happy review. This helps others find the show. We also want to give a big thanks to the indie band The E-Block for contributing their song Wake Up for our intro and outro music. You can find them at their website, eblockband.com. This is Jenn Zahrt, signing off for now. See you next time.